Thank you. Now I want to present our research study, which is aesthetic judgments and emotional response to architectural boundaries in virtual reality environments. So people spend approximately 90% of their time in buildings and interact intimately with the interior spaces. So the impact of interior space on human psychology could be measured by using aesthetic and emotional assessments. So the study proposed a new aesthetic and emotional framework within its psychological dimension for built environments. So the study aimed to understand how people perceive the interior space having different specific properties and boundary types within the scope of aesthetic and emotional assessment in virtual environments. So the first research question is that are aesthetic and emotional experience in architectural space be grouped to key psychological dimensions? According to this research question, the hypothesis is that the group of key psychological dimensions will be clarify the main idea of aesthetic and emotional experience in architectural space. So the second research question is that are these psychological dimensions sensitive to the specific property that are size, light, texture, and color, and curve boundary types, horizontal or vertical? And according to these research questions, the hypothesis is that a group of key psychological dimensions will be sensitive to the specific properties and curve boundary types. So in the methodology, I want to express method of the study as stage 1. 512 graduate and undergraduate students, both from social science and design departments in Bilkent University, participate in that study. And as an instrument, using head-mounted display equipment, experience level is rated at 360-degree spaces having the same floor area and moderate curves, either horizontal or vertical boundaries. So each participant rates one set of survey that consists of 4 virtual interior space with 2 curve boundary types and having only one of the specific properties. So in the environmental stimuli and procedure, each boundary type that are horizontal and vertical involves 4 specific properties of the surrounding surface at 2 levels of intensity as high and low. So in that point, why we prefer to use virtual reality? Because it enables user to immerse virtually in space. Defining the boundaries of architectural immersive environment imitates that of a visual living in space. Therefore, it enables to walk throughout space as if one were in the existing location. Implementation of boundaries of that space helps to create the viewer's sense of place within the environment, enriching the experience by enhancing engagement and meaning for the viewer more than a 3-dimensional way. So making sense of place within a virtual environment must draw attention to the sensations, feelings, thoughts, and emotions of a viewer of that place. So also the specific properties, size, light, texture, and color, unite to make a composition form an interior space. So these properties are different than others, such as furniture, openness, and type of wall, molar, etc., in terms of space unity. What I mean, these kinds of properties can easily change in the living environments when we compare to size, light, texture, and color. So besides, for the boundary types, the term architectural curve refers to the smooth transition between contours, that is walls. So as opposite to the sudden change. So geometric contour, especially curvilinear ones, curvilinear forms, have generated much interest from the built environment and aesthetic research. So many studies investigate human response to curvilinear forms in the built environment. So as a second stage of the methodology, I want to explain a framework of the study. The aesthetic and emotional qualities are based on three capacities of cognition, emotion, and behavior. So these which work together to help them create successful approach. This work flows that thoughts create feelings, feelings create interactions, and interaction reinforce thoughts. So the first class of the aesthetic and emotional experience in the initial evaluation of external qualities of space that is related to cognitive judgments. So the second class of aesthetic and emotional experience is the physical properties of an environment which would evoke feelings generated towards the environment. So the final class of aesthetic and emotional experience scale includes the psychological measures of dominance that refers to approach avoidance and behavioral intention. So different specific properties and boundary types within the scope of new framework of the aesthetic and emotional assessments in virtual environments analyzed. So according to this new framework, firstly, Katarzyna-Vartanian creates an aesthetic triad model of architectural experience to serve a fundamental framework. So according to the model, aesthetic experience in the built environment consists of three main scales in the neural system, and these are knowledge meaning, emotion valuation, and sensory motor system. So the knowledge meaning system informed by personal experience, culture, and education also shape one's encounter with the built environment. The emotion valuation network mediate feelings and emotion engendered by buildings and urban space. So the sensory motor system engages visual, auditory, somatosensory, olfactory, and vestibular system and trigger motor response, that is approach avoidance decision. So secondly, in addition, Katarzyna-Vartanian aesthetic triad model, Coburn and his colleagues adapted three important domains of psychological processing. There are cognition, emotion, and behavior. So cognition associated with the knowledge meaning, emotion delivered from the emotion valuation, and behavior linked to the sensory motor system. So finally, within the psychological framework, several aesthetical and emotional rating scale and the components that Elver adapted from certain literature. The cognitive judgments related with affective, formal, and symbolic variables. Emotional response associated with pleasure and arousal. Behavioral intention connected with the dominance. So the aesthetic and emotional experience component table demonstrates related adjectives within the low and high value. In the results, firstly, correlation matrix analysis conducted. So the 25 relevant aesthetic and emotional bipolar adjectives were rated as the predictor of the general linear model. Two dimensions of ratings revealed by RStudio. Each aesthetic and emotional experience measure represents a node in figure, and the edges between two measures show the correlation between two aesthetic emotional experience. So metrics reveal that there are several relationships that represent small values or weak correlations. So correspondingly, in order to eliminate noise problem in the result, 10 adjectives eliminated. Secondly, principal component analysis was carried out to realize significant components between 15 variables. Factor loadings on the two main principal components, which are PCA 1 and 2, specify the two key psychological dimensions named as satisfactoriness and excitableness. After that, thirdly, psychometric network analysis created. The network's approach defines psychological construct as a complex system. So phenomena that emerge form the interaction between dimension of multidimensional construct. So PNA provides a map for analyzing the psychological components of aesthetic and emotional experience defined by the 15 adjective measures of experience, which are donated as the nodes and their interaction between the clusters. So the happiness adjective is common in both clusters in PNA model. Finally, multivariate analysis investigated the relationship between two main psychological key concepts that are satisfactoriness and excitableness with the specific architectural properties that are size, light, texture, and color, and boundary types, which are horizontal and vertical, are analyzed. So figure gives the adjectives analysis of the poor evaluation between each satisfactoriness and excitableness for each specific properties. So as a result, satisfactoriness and excitableness are the two main key dimensions of aesthetic and emotional experience. So also, large size, bright light, lateral texture, and cool color are highly related to key psychological dimensions. So we can say that curved horizontal boundary types are more relevant to the size and light space properties, while both curved boundary types are related to texture and color space properties. So as a further study, we would like to extend this work by studying the neural basis of the perception of physical spaces using EEG and virtual reality. Our long-term goal is to understand neural basis of sensory, cognitive, and aesthetic emotional experience of perception of architecture and contribute to interdisciplinary work between neuroscience and architecture. So these are our references. And thank you. And if you want to ask any question or get information about the topic, you can always contact me. Thank you.